together once again on a really beautiful day. First, JR is home. So, yay! He spent 5 weeks in a brothel. I don't even know what else to say. 2 weeks from today is going to be September 8th, and there's going to be a congregational meeting immediately following the worship service. So please take note of that. That is about moving forward in doing the air conditioning repair in the building next door, as well as funding and planning for a future capital campaign. That is 2 weeks from today. A very special happy birthday is going to Dot Stem. If you get a chance to drop her a note or a card, that would be great. The flowers are in honor of the 37th wedding anniversary of John and Janet Manza, whoever they are. And today's bulletin is sponsored in honor of their 45th wedding anniversary by David and Nancy. We do have other announcements. If you are interested in learning more about the church or becoming a member, and there's no obligation to do this, but I'm having coffee with the pastor September 1st and September 8th from 9:15 to 10:15 in my office, and anybody is welcome to come to that. There's announcements about all choir rehearsals beginning, as well as worship setup and cleanup day, and the Bible fund, so please take note of it. Tisa has an announcement she'd like to make.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, do you know what time it is? The sign-up sheets for various Harvest Homecoming activities will be on the ledge in the back of the room here. We wanted you to have a little bit more information about the different jobs that are needed, and particularly we put this in here for new members or people who haven't volunteered before. We really need everybody to participate and to sign up more than once for more than one shift even. We are also encouraging people. One of the reasons we did this list was that we have jobs that require you to be on your feet a lot of the shift. And so we really would like to encourage the people who can do that to sign up for those activities and to reserve some of those seated activities for those of us whose backs are a little not so good or feet hurt a lot, and give us a chance to sit down in some of the other jobs. So we'll have all those sign-ups next week, and we are ready. And what time is it?
It's good that you have a handle on that video. I would use myself if nobody else. Let us center ourselves and prepare ourselves for worship with our music for Sunday. God calls us into God's presence, and we are invited and challenged and commanded to worship God. It is not because God is made better by worship. It is because we are made better by the worship of God. For us, there is a need to worship.
The need goes on. The need goes on.
When we worship God in spirit and truth, we're able to see our place in the universe. We recognize the awesome power and grace of God, but we are made stronger and better in our own relationship to God. For us, there is a need to worship.
The need goes on. The need goes on.
We look around and amongst ourselves and accept the challenge to worship God. We promise to welcome and love all who enter our doors. We commit to serving God's people and being God's hands and feet. This is who we are, a church, a place of refuge. And for us, we recognize in order to continue this, to continue to be God's hands and feet.
The need goes on. The need goes on.
I invite all who can do so comfortably to please rise and sing the hymn in this very room. share God's peace with those around us.
that particular song, I feel the presence of God and I give a little bit of worship. even on the mountaintop or even at the ocean. So will you join with me in singing? I bet you, once I start, you'll recognize it. Ready? And I ask the congregation to also sing with me. Because as the older youth will tell you, I do not have the gift of song. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise God, all creatures here below. Praise God, the heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. God, thank you for these children. We thank you for allowing us to worship you wherever we may be, or whatever structure we may be in. We pray in your name. Amen. Now, I ask that you sit here with me. Don't get up yet. We're going to sit here. We have a skit to watch, and then we can go over to the vicinity of Children's Church of Parents.
The year is 2049. The pastor of St. Mark's United Church of Christ is the Reverend Dr. Mary Ficker, and she has been a pastor of the church for the last 5 years. The president of the church council is Caroline Essex. She and Pastor Mary have known each other most of their lives and work very well together.
So, Mary, I wanted to come by and talk to you about stewardship again this year. It's that time of year, we have to do the stewardship campaign, and I think we have a lot of challenges.
For sure. And we have to do worship in the fellowship hall. The air conditioning is out in the sanctuary. This time, the trustees said it was gone for good.
Remember when we were kids? There was a summer where we were to worship in the fellowship hall. It was about 30 years ago. They said the new system will last 20 to 30 years, and I guess it's been 30 years. It's dead and deceased. We have to plan around it.
I know. We had a staff meeting. We were trying to figure out so many things, like where to line up the cherub and the youth choir. You know, Caroline, I can't believe it. Your grandmother is still doing the choir.
Just one more year. She is remarkable. Well, except for some dental things. Uncle Todd used to take care of her, of course, but now that Xander has taken over the practice, well, you know Xander. He loves her dearly and loves to be creative, but she's not always happy with the funky dentures he's making for her.
Well, that's Xander. So we really need to talk about stewardship. Most things are going decently. We have some young families, kids are around, and the music is still great. Things are good, except we always seem to be coming up short with our giving, and I wish worship attendance would go up a bit.
I was thinking about that. You know, we have a really good worship services. The music is always good, our mission work is great, and the services are always well planned and theatrical, and your sermons are on point.
Thanks. Funny thing about growing up in this church and coming back to serve it. I remember years ago, John Manzo had gray hair and was always talking about the Giants. He'd been here as long as either of us could remember. They were saying the same things. The music was really good. We have a great mission, and the services were well planned. And his sermons were usually on point too. Except, well, you know.
Yeah. But I liked his jokes and thought his songs were good. Some people just weren't really enough to get them. I wonder what he's doing now. He'd be like 94, wouldn't he?
Yes, 94. You'd never believe what he's doing. He lives in Hawaii, and he actually lives in a little tent on the beach and teaches surfing. He's when we were kids. Like you said earlier, 30 years ago, we were in fellowship hall for worship for a while, just like we are now. The air conditioning was out in the sanctuary. That awesome guy Ken was working with the youth. Sarah was the organist. She was great. Mark was the choir director, and your mom was doing our group, Celebration Singers. And your grandma was doing cherubs and youth choir.
Yep, seems like yesterday. Literally. Let's see. Since then, Sarah retired a few years ago when we finally got the organ fixed. Mom passed the torch and is finally getting some R&R down south. Gramps is still at it, of course. Mark became the lead choral director at Carnegie Hall, and Ken became a minister, and then I heard he retired a few years back as well. And here we are.
Here we are, stewardship, and we are going to have to do a capital campaign to fix the air conditioning. It's really important that we do both.
Do you think we really should be doing a stewardship campaign this year? I know that we're going to be dropping a lot of money to fix the air conditioning. Do you think maybe we could skip doing the stewardship campaign this year?
No, Caroline, we can't. The need goes on. A lot of people depend on St. Mark's. We are still doing mission work. We still have our soup kitchen, our clothes closet, and the health fair. People are still seeking out a church where they can become welcome. A lot of people depend on us. Believe it or not, when people pass by the church, it is still a beacon of hope to a lot of people.
You're right. I know that, and you are correct. The need goes on. I've been super impressed that people have been so cool with this being in the fellowship hall for worship. Just like we were 30 years ago, and the spirit here is still good.
So let's get down to business. What's a good theme?
No. Maybe we'll reach back and do what they did 30 years ago last time we were in this situation. And the need goes on.
Good idea. One thing is certain. The need does go on.
Amen. Well, good, that's settled. By the way, did you decide what you're doing for vacation this year?
Heck yeah! I'm going to Hawaii. Planning on going to the beach, getting surfing lessons from my predecessor, and take notes on some good puns. You know, church always needs some humor.
Oh, that's true. Speaking of that, you want me to tell John to consider taking out a new insurance policy in case the waves start breaking.
I guess some things never change.
Oh, no, they don't.
The need
really does go on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I will be reading the scripture today, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 to 20. Be careful then how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of time because the days are evil. So do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit as you sing psalms and hymns and the spiritual songs among yourselves, singing and making melody to the Lord in your hearts, giving thanks to God the Father at all times, and for this evening in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And now this morning's reflection by Dr. John E. Danza. Gracious God, we thank you for gathering us for worship today. Some things need to be.
Let us pray. Most holy God, let us always know that the need goes on as we reach up to you in worship. One night, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson were out camping. Sherlock Holmes woke up in the middle of the night and nudged his friend awake. And he said, "Watson, look up. What do you observe?" And Watson looked up and he said, "Well, I see a crescent quarter moon in the eastern sky, and there's just a smattering of clouds." "And," said Holmes, "I see the Big Dipper in the west, and I see a glimpse of the Milky Way overhead." "Is there anything else you noticed?" asked Holmes. And Dr. Watson said, No. Why do you ask? Sherlock Holmes said, I'm asking because you're missing the most obvious thing. Somebody has stolen our tent. Some things are so obvious we overlook them. Today is the second Sunday in our worship series, The Need Goes On. And the stewardship theme and the worship themes this year are reflecting on our mission statement point by point. And the very first point of our mission statement says that we reach out to worship of God. The worship of God, sometimes obviously and sometimes not so obviously, is the primary responsibility and task of every church. St. Paul, writing to the Ephesians, reminds them to sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves, singing and making melody to the Lord in your hearts. He reminds them to do this and focus on this instead of drinking too much, as too much wine leads to drunkenness, and drunkenness leads to debauchery. The early church had a problem with wine. If wine was the blood of Christ with Holy Communion, and a little made you holy, people said a little more made you even more holy. And a little more than that made you holier than ever. And imagine how holy you would be if you drank a lot of wine, which of course was not the point. So Paul reminds them, instead of trying to get holier by means of debauchery, he reminds them to sing the psalms and spiritual songs and get back to what people do, that is, worship. Let me share some things about worship that to me are really important. First of all, the structure of worship is something we call liturgy. And the word liturgy is actually defined as the work of the people. When we come to worship, we are all a part of it. We all have skin in the game at worship. The classic illustration of a worship service was that God was the director, the ministers, the musicians, the readers were all actors on the stage, and the congregation was the audience. But that's a really poor and bogus illustration. When we understand worship as liturgy, as the work of the people, it's the instance where the congregation are actually the actors on the stage. Those who are leading the worship service are the directors, and God is the audience. We are here to worship God. We do this all for God. Often people talk about planning worship. And the word planning to me is an inadequate word. I like the word prepare better. It is something I really worked on and discovered on my sabbatical 7 years ago. We can plan a meal. We can decide we're going to make a roast and mashed potatoes and gravy and green beans. We can write it down and have it all planned. But on paper, it exists as absolutely nothing. It's a plan, but it doesn't come to life until we actually prepare it. When we put the roast in the oven and we cook it and mash the potatoes and simmer the gravy and cook the green beans and get hungrier as I'm talking about it, we are preparing it. And that's how I try to ponder worship. It's not planned as much as it's prepared. For me, it's a reminder that this is the work of God's people, and we're all invited to make sure we enter into it fully. And there's a second thing about worship that to me is really important. Worship to me should remind us of the transcendence of God. We often approach God as being immanent, meaning that God is in our midst, present with us, walking with us. God is close to us. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in God's name, God is with us. And that's really good. I like that. Sometimes we also have to recognize that God is transcendent. God is the magnificent creator of the universe, the unmoved mover, God who is beyond our understanding. The reality is that God is both immanent and transcendent. God is both in our midst and out there, approachable and beyond our understanding all at once. But sometimes at worship, I think we always have to make sure we take time to focus on the transcendence of God. It can't always be our buddy God, but a deliberate understanding that God is holy, God is other than us, God is beyond our understanding. Sometimes we need to remember that as we worship God. I was reading the other day that within the Roman Catholic community, many people are going to look back to the old-style Latin Masses. Many of the people who are interested in doing this are too young to have even seen or experienced this, because the Mass was changed in the mid-60s. It's something that I barely remember. Much of this nostalgia is misplaced nostalgia. But for many, I understand it because there's a desire to see God as transcendent. When we see a worship service done in a different language, and much of what is happening is hidden from view, there's a greater sense of mystery and a pondering of God beyond our understanding. I could argue and say that this is also an easy way to avoid doing the work of the people, because it's something that only the priest does. The concept of mystery is important. My point is that when we gather at worship, we do things, and sometimes we change things up. We throw each other off. So we never get totally comfortable. It's a reminder that for God to be transcendent, God has to be beyond our understanding. And we can't always be super comfortable with God. We always have to remember that God is holy. Lastly, part of this worship series is entitled, "The Need Goes On." It's a reflective point of our mission statement to reach out to God. Worship has to feed us and it grounds us in everything we do. Worship is what differentiates us from a social service agency or a place for fun. We worship. Years ago, when I first got in the ministry of the United Church of Christ, one of my colleagues was an older minister who had served his churches for many years. The United Church of Christ congregations in that region were all old German Reformed churches that were founded in the 18th and early 19th century. My colleague said that no matter whatever happened, they would never cancel a worship service, even if only he, as the pastor, would go to church. The old dictum was that God had to be worshipped every Sunday. He was the pastor of 3 churches, and he would go to all 3 churches every Sunday morning to lead worship. And he lived right next door to one of the churches. And he said that when there was a blizzard and 2 feet of snow and worship was canceled, he got out of his parsonage and walked next door to the church, climbed through the snow and got into the church and had the full-on worship service. He put on his robe, he sang all the hymns, he did the entire worship service just for himself, because he said there was one dictum he lived by: God had to be worshipped every Sunday, and he did it. I'm not sure I would ever do what he did like that, but I really respected his enthusiasm and his commitment, because for him, God had to be worshipped. Part of our mission is to worship God, and it's to do the work of God's people in worship. It is preparing ourselves and getting ourselves ready and having skin in the game of worship. It is also a time to embrace the mystery and the transcendence of God. But above all, let us always make sure to remember that worship is our lifeblood. It drives everything else that we do. Amen.
Amen.
As we gather for worship, there are people we'd still like to remember in prayer. We remember Carson Wallace, Gail Blank, Susan Wells, Arlene Schei, Sharon Polk is going to be having surgery on Tuesday, so we ask you to keep her in your prayers. Calvin Mullins, Sarah Glass, Bryce Whitson, Pat Gallagher, Juanita Sunderland, Dorothy Shipley, Baby M, who is the child of Carol and Jen. We also pray today. At 3 o'clock today is going to be noted that it's the 400th anniversary of the first slave that was brought to the American continent. So many churches are going to be ringing the 4 bells today for each of the centuries. Take time today at 3 o'clock if you remember, and maybe take time to pray and ponder the fact that 400 years ago this took place. Are there other people or needs that you would like us to remember in prayer? Yes? Who's this? Brian Steele is having some issues, so we'd like us to keep us in our his prayer. Yes?
My brother-in-law,
Lou Swank. Okay. Yes?
My daughter, Eleanor, she went last Friday to have her cast off. They thought she would be all healed up and done, but she had to have it put back on.
Okay. So we'll continue to pray for Eleanor.
Yeah, she goes in this Friday to have it taken off again.
Okay.
See if it's better. And so really
Let's hope she gets it taken off.
Yes, we're good.
Kyle Crew? Okay. Okay. Yes? Jenny Stepbro?
Jenny Steepro passed this week.
Jenny Steepro. The family of and friends of Jenny Steepro. Some things to joy. I'm impressed how well people continue to work together with our new space. Happy to see JR back after his time in Pennsylvania. And glad that Ken made it back after his vacation, and his back is feeling a little better. I would like to thank Mary and Carolyn for doing the great job you did this morning. Great job. Are there other people or things you would like to be grateful for? Yes?
I have an orientation at Louisville Presbyterian Seminary starting tomorrow.
All right, Ken has orientation at Louisville Seminary Monday and Tuesday. Yes?
The Christian Aid Department will be starting their logo straight Sunday school starting next Sunday, right? Or is it next Sunday, the 8th?
The 8th. Yes, it's called the LIFT program, yes.
The LIFT program, so looking forward to that.
Excellent. Let us, yeah.
Cameron Schneider made it to anew, and she started school Monday. So
Right.
that's joy.
Yes, very much so. Cameron Schneider made it back to made it to school. Let us pray. Most holy God, we are honored, we are privileged. It is our joy to be able to gather as your people, gathering in worship. Sometimes we don't fully appreciate how important it is for us to worship you. Let us know that we worship you not because you need our prayers, but that we need you and we need to pray to you. Let us recognize that when we are in relationship with you, it is only then when we are made fully whole. It is only then when we have hearts open to fully love. It is only then that we are able to fully serve. Let us remind us, oh God, that whenever we serve you, no matter what we do it for you and for your greater glory, and as we serve you and your people. Help us to seek your presence in all people, but always seek you first. Help us always to walk humbly with you. Let us always know that for us the need always goes on. As we pray in Jesus' name, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Let us share our gifts with God as the need does continue to go on.
Some things we take the ability to worship together as a church family for granted. Today we thank all the people who enable our worship experience to fill us with your grace. Please accept our offerings today and remind us that the need does go on. Amen.
Let us turn and face each other and commission each other. Let us go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Honor all people. Love and serve the Lord.
Rejoice in the power
of the Holy Spirit. Let us sing our closing hymn, Let There Be Peace on Earth.
Amen.